Hello and welcome to the channel. I am here for a list video for you guys. Now for this list video, I'll be telling you guys my top 5 favorite metal subgenres. Now I know I've technically already did a list video like this before, but there are some things about that list that has changed. One of the subgenres that were on that list is actually not going to be on this list. Yes, my mind has changed quite a bit about certain subgenres, and some that I've grown to appreciate more. And also, I've had a lot of newcomers since the last time I did that video, so yeah, you'll be getting a list of my current favorite subgenres of metal. So yeah, and this is in no particular order, by the way. So I think we're going to start with metalcore. Now metalcore, this was actually one of the first metal subgenres that I've ever gotten into. I know that metalcore is actually a good gateway for a lot of people just starting to get into metal. I know it was for me. I started out with bands like Demon Hunter and As I Lay Dying, and kind of just went off from there. You know, and I'm also into other bands too, like All That Remains, August Burns Red, Killswitch Engage, and in recent time, Avenged Sevenfold. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of great metalcore bands, and even Trivium as well. Now, Trivium, you could argue, is metalcore or not, but I don't know. You could throw Trivium in the metalcore spectrum. But yeah, metalcore definitely has a lot to offer. Although, when it comes to newer metalcore, like late 2000s, early 2010s bands, not that good. More on the edgy side of things, but early 2000s bands in metalcore, definitely great stuff. Definitely a lot of great bands. So yeah, metalcore, I think it's kind of an overhated subgenre. I think it's definitely one that deserves more recognition from the metal community. I think there's a lot of elitists especially that just don't like metalcore. Now metalcore I wouldn't put at the top as far as, you know, my number one favorite subgenre goes, but I still think it's a really good subgenre and kind of overlooked to somewhat of an extent. Alright, so next up we got nu metal. Now, there was actually a point where nu metal was one of my least favorite subgenres of metal, but I don't know, I've actually really grown to like it. I think my problem with nu metal for the longest time was the fact it was very, like, silly sounding, and I wasn't really too fond of that style, but I've actually kind of grown to have a liking towards, you know, a lot of bands in nu metal. I think a lot of nu metal has this really raw, like, just this raw, heavy sound to it, especially when it comes to early nu metal, some of the pioneers. Like, you think about bands like Slipknot. Now, I know Slipknot is pretty heavy. You know, they're a really heavy band, you know, for, you know, as mainstream as they are, but Slipknot is definitely one of my favorites, maybe even my favorite nu metal band, but I don't know. Definitely a very good band, though. There's also Seven Dust. Seven Dust is a very underrated band, I think, and yeah, they're definitely another one of my other favorite nu metal bands. I also like Linkin Park. Now, they haven't really been nu metal for a while. I would say their first 2 albums are nu metal. Their other stuff, not so much. And then, you know, there's bands like Korn that I kind of like. I really like their debut album. I just really like the raw intensity of that album. I do need to check out some of Korn's other stuff, too. And there's other bands I do want to check out in nu metal as well, like Deftones. But yeah, nu metal, I've actually grown to really like this subgenre of metal. I mean, if it was still like 4 years ago, I don't even know if I were to put this subgenre on a list like this. But yeah, I like nu metal. Alright, so next up we got thrash metal. Now, I understand thrash metal is very hit or miss for some people, but I actually do like thrash metal. It's a very, very good subgenre. I understand that, you know, there's some people that do complain that, you know, it's very samey, and sure, you know, it can be samey, but, and the thing that I don't understand about that argument, though, is the fact that, you know, the people that call it samey are also the people that, you know, are constantly listening to black metal or death metal or mellow death. I mean, do I even need to form an argument, you know? But yeah, thrash metal, definitely a great subgenre. Many great bands in this subgenre, like Metallica, of course, the biggest heavy metal band, and they were actually my first thrash metal band, I think. I also like Megadeth and Anthrax, and even a little bit of Overkill. So yeah, I do definitely prefer the older style of thrash opposed to the newer style. I'm personally just not really the biggest fan of newer thrash metal, but the older stuff I dig a lot. But overall, thrash metal is a really good subgenre of metal, and it is, of course, one of the biggest subgenres in metal. Yeah, thrash metal, definitely very good, and has a lot of essential bands too, like Megadeth and Metallica. Alright, so next subgenre up, we got progressive metal. Man, progressive metal is just amazing. I mean, it's definitely one of my favorite subgenres of metal. Many great bands in this subgenre, like Queensryche, Dream Theater, Fate's Warning. I mean, just and many others as well. But yeah, I think, you know, when it comes to progressive metal, I definitely also prefer the classic era of progressive metal, you know, the pioneers like Queensryche and Fate's Warning. Newer progressive metal is alright, you know. Bands like Leprous, I think, are okay, but I don't know. I'm just not into a lot of newer progressive metal. But the older stuff, it's pretty awesome, I have to say, especially Queensryche. Queensryche and Dream Theater are probably my favorites in the subgenre. Progressive metal definitely has a lot of variety to it, I think. And there's a lot of subgenres of metal that do combine prog with it. Even some bands in metalcore like Trivium. You know, I think progressive metal just has a lot to it. But yeah, progressive metal, easily one of my favorites. Lastly, we're going to jump to new wave. Now, you could say new wave of British heavy metal or just new wave in general, but yeah. I think new wave is definitely one of the best. I think if you're a metalhead in general, this one definitely has to be on your list, considering bands like Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest came from this subgenre. Of course, the new wave of British heavy metal, and I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said? I mean, this is basically the style that pretty much invented the metal genre. I mean, there's not really much to say. It's pretty self-explanatory, you know. And if you're someone who's into classic rock and you're looking to get into metal, I think new wave of British heavy metal is a good gateway for you, because it's basically the closest you're going to get to classic rock, especially with bands like early Judas Priest and early Black Sabbath. But yeah. But that's my list, guys. That is my list of my top 5 favorite metal subgenres. Let me know what you guys think, and what are your top 5 favorite metal subgenres? Feel free to let me know in the comments. So with that being said, thanks for watching, and take care.